2024 marked the first time the Formula One grid started and ended with all the drivers staying with their teams going into the new season. However, early this year, the Formula One world was shocked as Lewis Hamilton announced his move from Mercedes to Ferrari, starting the silly season early. And with several drivers out of contract at the end of this year, including Carlos Sainz, we're going to have a look at the drivers' market and see who might move to where. Well, I'm Bryn Lucas, and joining me, I'm delighted to have Alex Kalinauckas, who's written an article on Autosport.com about this very topic. Now, Alex, let's kick it off, shall we? It is looking like it's going to be the silliest of silly seasons.
Yeah, hi Bryn, hi listeners, hi viewers. I always like the silly season moniker, because obviously that's addressing the speculation and the rumours that we love that swirl around Formula One. But of course, actually, very, very, very serious business, which we illustrated on the cover of Autosport magazine with some nice squiggles, which I thought was particularly good. Although, on reflection, this one definitely shouldn't be just going off into the ether. It should be pointing directly at this man who he's replacing, Lewis Hamilton, going to replace Carlos Sainz at Ferrari. But yeah, very serious business in the end, driver contracts. And at the same time, you know, it's what interests people, that sort of expectation of change coming in the future, potentially that the change might lead to a better Formula One or more interesting Formula One, unless, of course, you're a Red Bull or a Max Verstappen fan. So yeah, very convoluted, lots of twists and turns still to come, I'm sure. But yeah, let's run down what we know as of right now.
Absolutely. Now, I hinted at the top that you've written an article. It's a very, very in-depth article, and I urge our viewers, our listeners, to go and check that out once you've finished listening or watching to this episode. Now, we'll start with what happened at the beginning of the year. Lewis Hamilton surprising us all, really, with this shock move, in inverted commas, I suppose, to Ferrari. And that, we're not going to really talk about the teams that are retaining or that we know their lineup. So we know Ferrari, we're just going to say Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton 2025. But that move from Lewis Hamilton really did throw the cat among the pigeons, because there's now a seat at Mercedes, there's Carlos Sainz leaving Ferrari. So where should we start? Let's start with Red Bull. Why not? Because Red Bull is where it all seems to always start and end, doesn't it, at the moment? So we'll start with Max Verstappen. We know he's staying, but his teammate Sergio Perez, there's a big question mark over him.
Well, is Max Verstappen staying, Bryn? That is, if anything, the more interesting element of the Red Bull discussion. And yeah, as you say, Ferrari being locked down in terms of 25, that was expected, considering Charles Leclerc got contract extensions. Carlos Sainz was in talks about staying there. But ultimately, the Lewis Hamilton bombshell just changed everything, didn't it? So yeah, Mercedes having a seat open, how rare is it that a top team suddenly has to change its plans at the last minute? But even more surprisingly was what happened at Red Bull at the start of the year. The Christian Horner scandal, we now sort of term it. Also the Red Bull management war, because we know that there's lots of internal power struggle going on within Red Bull. That includes the wider organisation. It's almost sort of OEM level, isn't it? The wider Red Bull energy drink group. But there we go. Yeah, that potentially, the outcome of that uncertainty there, while it has cooled significantly since the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, when it was really sort of at a kind of fever pitch, that could drastically alter the sort of the fate of Red Bull and the future of its driver lineup heading into 2025. Because let's face it, Christian Horner, when I was last in the paddock in the Japanese Grand Prix, very much seeming more confident in his position and in various other positions. For example, the future of Max Verstappen. He's still not as public facing as we've seen him in previous years, but at the Chinese Grand Prix, when the questions put to him about what Toto Wolff is saying about Max Verstappen, seems to get under Horner's skin quite quickly there. So yeah, it's definitely still not 100% certain. Again, the messages, the reports coming out of the Shanghai paddock is that Max Verstappen is pretty much keen on staying. Like, he doesn't want to leave. That said, we've still got the FIA probe into the Horner matter, and of course the appeal into the decision to clear him in that scandal. Those outcomes are still to come. It was put to me in Japan that this is basically what we're in right now, is the calm between two storms, that there is much more to come on this front. And potentially that's what could lead to Max Verstappen going. It is a more remote chance, but there is still a slim possibility that he might end up at a different team in 2025. And of course, yeah, that would mean, the contract that he signed, that, very, very long contract, keeping him there until 2028, that would have to be essentially ripped up. But yeah, the other seat, what happens to Sergio Perez? That is what we were all expecting to be talking about throughout 2024, particularly this early stage of the season. Daniel Ricciardo back at RB. There was then AlphaTauri last year. Would he sort of, basically stake a claim, a commanding, decisive claim by being excellent in the middle order, while Perez yet again sort of flailed around, was well off the pace in Verstappen's wake? Well, the opposite has happened in pretty much all of what I've just said there. Ricciardo has been very, very disappointing. I mean, now really the question is, does he deserve a place in Formula One for much longer? We'll come to that later on. But with Sergio Perez, yeah, he is doing better. Of course, he's got those second places behind all of Max Verstappen's victories. But he left himself open yet again in Australia to being beaten, picking up damage in the pack as he tried to come back from a poor qualifying and a penalty in qualifying. So again, he showed that when Red Bull does need him to pick up the pieces, he failed to do that. That said, he's got those second places when it has won this season. So essentially, Red Bull's like, great, he's doing what we want, mostly. He's doing it well, but they don't know if he's going to keep this form up. So what Red Bull wants to do is wait potentially until the summer to see if he's still doing that. And I think ideally it would like to offer him a new contract covering 2025. A lot of the other players in the driver market, they want their decision made much sooner.
Yeah, and it's a very, very convoluted story at Red Bull, isn't it, at the moment? Because it all depends on what goes on with Max Verstappen. That all depends, it seems to be, on what happens with the outcome of this investigation, which we won't know for, I don't know how long. I mean, you probably know more than me of when the outcome of that is likely to happen. But that knock-on effect for Max Verstappen is what is the big question mark over Sergio Perez. Because if you're Christian Horner, or if you're the hierarchy at Red Bull and you've got Max Verstappen staying on, is it better the devil you know and keep Perez in that seat as a decent number two that's pretty much this season doing what he needs to do there? Or do you look elsewhere irrespective of what Max does?
Well, I think it seems that with Ricciardo underperforming, where else is Red Bull going to look in terms of its own drivers? You'd have to say it can only really look now to Yuki Tsunoda, who, as a Honda-linked, Honda-backed formerly driver, he has no way of getting to Aston Martin because, as many people will understand and know and be frustrated with, Aston Martin isn't going to get rid of the owner's son, and it's just tied Fernando Alonso to a new deal. So Tsunoda, when that team gets a Honda Works deal in 2026, he can't go there for that season. So Red Bull could look at him. But yeah, if Verstappen goes, of course, that will create a lot of uncertainty. But I think Red Bull did look at every element. I mean, we know they talked to Fernando Alonso, the suggestion, which Alonso sort of alluded to, then immediately shut down, which could also apply to Mercedes, is that they were sort of offering short-term contracts or short-term deals, that he wanted a long-term thing. But the other, of course, major talking point with Red Bull is Carlos Sainz. Now, effectively, Helmut Marko, revealing in an interview ahead of the Chinese Grand Prix, he's claiming, and of course he's the source on this, we haven't heard it from Sainz itself, nor in my case from Sainz's camp, is that Audi, which of course is taking over the Sauber team, has offered, in Marko's words, a very lucrative offer that Red Bull can't match, which sounds slightly disingenuous considering just how much money the Red Bull group can bring in with those small but very potent cans of energy drink and all its big marketing activations around the world. But yeah, that's the situation as it stands. Red Bull seems like it would be open to Sainz joining, whether that's as a replacement to Perez or whether it's as a replacement to Verstappen, more likely the Perez scenario as things stand. But it's claiming that they're not willing to sort of pay over the odds. Audi potentially is. He's a very highly rated race winner, so it would be getting something massively significant if it does want to stump up the money. So yeah, it's not quite as simple as Red Bull wants it to be, and it's also not as simple in a different way as the Sainzes would like it. If
we keep the link then between the Red Bull drivers and another team, the next team I'm going to bring up is Mercedes, because they've got an empty seat, as we know, with Hamilton leaves George Russell there. He's still got his contract for a little bit longer, to the end of 2025. There seems to be quite a lot of names associated with that seat. Is Carlos Sainz one of those names, though?
Carlos Sainz certainly is one of those names. There are also others. I mean, I think Esteban Ocon, Pierre Gasly, plenty of available drivers, as you said at the start, Bryn. Esteban Ocon he's basically waving a flag saying, look, I'm still a Mercedes junior, his exact words. So I think, the problem for all of them is that basically if there was to be a driver switch, like an existing F1 driver going to Mercedes alongside George Russell, they would only be offered a 1-year contract, because Mercedes' preference, whether this happens for 2025 or 26 or 27, is that its highly rated young driver, Andrea Kimi Antonelli, is promoted into Formula One. And ideally, Mercedes wants to do that for next year. And again, this is a team that's happy to wait for make its decision. Antonelli's racing in Formula 2 with Prema Racing. He's very highly rated, but so far things haven't come together. It's a championship that, you know, there can, 1 minute you can look like a zero, 1 minute you can look like a hero, but it hasn't had that momentum that we've seen, for example, in recent years, drivers like Oscar Piastri, George Russell, or Charles Leclerc. Now, Russell's season, of course, was very up and down, but he did ultimately win it. But that's what Mercedes wants to do, because it doesn't want to miss out on losing another highly rated junior like it did with Max Verstappen going to Red Bull. So it wants to wait. And at the same time, if it does wait, it can say, well, okay, actually, maybe he's not ready for the works team. We can either keep him in Formula 2 for another year if he doesn't win the title, or we can place him, say, at a customer team, a closely tied customer team like Williams. Now, again, a suggestion made to me in the paddock in Suzuka is that Williams actually be open to that. It's keeping its cards quite close to its chest, other than very much saying Alex Albon is off limits for 2025. But I think you'd have to say Williams would be open to having Antonelli, and it would gain from doing so, because he's so highly rated. Potentially you add in then the potential for other factors like engine discounts from Mercedes, its customer partner. So, you know, there is the option of that happening for both Williams and for Mercedes. That then you get into the, well, then who goes to Mercedes for the short term? Let's say it's Ocon. He's at an Alpine team that's badly underperforming. I honestly can't see it attracting any other drivers other than anyone sort of more desperate to prolong their career at this stage. Ocon would conceivably perhaps think, okay, I'll go to Mercedes, I'll be a works driver. If I beat George Russell when his contract is up, and we know that's going to be coming sooner rather than later in terms of the greater long term, why not pick me and put Antonelli in the other car? Or just be so good and Antonelli continues to not progress as Mercedes hopes or wants, then at least you're in the fight. So it's, okay, I'll accept the short term in the hope that it turns into something else. You know, hey, who hasn't had, you know, job potential that or career opportunities where you take something in the short term thinking about it maybe developing long term, and if it doesn't work out that way, then you try and go in a different direction. So yeah, Mercedes happy to wait. That presents opportunity for other drivers.
Now, I've got a feeling we're going to mention Antonelli again in just a bit. Before we do, let's jump to a totally different team from the ones we've mentioned so far, which are more the front runners. Let's go to Sauber. And you have mentioned Sauber already in relation to Carlos Sainz, because Audi taking over the stewardship of that team from 2026. But, you know, who knows what's going to happen there with the deal they've got. But they want to come into Formula One, and they want to come in and make a mark straight away. It doesn't look like they're trying to build slowly.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's been interesting to hear, again, Helmut Marko, you know, sort of driver market stuff. He obviously considers this very much his domain. He was saying at Suzuka, look, the pressure that Audi's been applying at the driver market, that's another factor in why things have kicked off so early, because, and then as he expanded upon heading towards trying to this supposed lucrative offer to Carlos Sainz. I mean, you can totally see it from Audi's point of view. Why would you not want to get your 2026 driver lineup sorted and in place for 2025? Because then if you go to two new drivers replacing Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu, you get them settled in and aligned with what the team is and how it works and everything. But also, if you bring in Carlos Sainz from Ferrari, somebody else from another experience of another power unit, you've got their insight into how things should be performing when it comes to Audi building its own engine. So that's obviously beneficial to get other drivers in as early as possible. There are sort of red flags, for want of a better word, with any driver, including Sainz, wanting to or considering going to Audi. Look, yeah, it's a massively prestigious brand. What it did with its success in Le Mans, the World Endurance Championship, the impact that made on its car sales, absolutely tremendous. But Formula One is really not that far on from the massive failure of the Toyota project, where it came in with massive amount of money and achieved absolutely nothing. There's now a cost cap era that makes it, even a manufacturer as massive as Mercedes can't catch up with Red Bull, because the nuances of this ground effect means that unless you got your concept right immediately, you're always massively playing catch up. So a driver going there may never win. That said, they could come in with the best engine in 2026 and blow the field away. That's equally as possible. Of course it is. With Audi, it's not just Sainz that this sort of feeds into. The understanding is that Nico Hülkenberg is very much on Audi's radar, and he's already said Audi's on his radar. So it could lead to big change elsewhere. Equally, we saw how well Zhou Guanyu was received at the Chinese Grand Prix in a car that's where it's going to finish for the foreseeable. So, yeah, he's not the most highly rated driver, but he has a real value in terms of Audi wanting to sell more electric vehicles or more vehicles overall in China to that market. So it's not just sort of as simple as saying Audi comes in, picks the two best available drivers, and there you go. But as I said, it's not a given that going to Audi would mean Formula One success. It might, however, give what a lot of racing drivers really do want, long-term stability, the paycheck coming in, a healthy paycheck from a big manufacturer. So you can equally see, as much as it might be a risk, it's also potentially a big benefit.
No, absolutely. Pierre Gasly then and Esteban Ocon, you've mentioned Alpine already to a degree. These two drivers, both contracts up at the end of this season. You've mentioned where one of them could go potentially, but it's tricky, isn't it, Alpine? Because it's a team that's not really helping to improve a driver's own stock because of the results they're unable to get during the Grand Prix weekend.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Alpine, because just the full force of the team's got to be going on getting the car, just making it quicker, making it competitive. It's a pretty shocking situation to find itself in. I think the team would ideally like stability. I think they do seem to have a bit of a knack for getting close to each other, as we saw in China. I mean, that happened with Ocon and Fernando Alonso in years previously. So it's not something that Alpine are unfamiliar with. Their two teammates, running each other very, very hard and very, very close. But I think Gasly and Ocon continuing at Alpine, other than the lack of competitiveness in the car, it's still, the Renault backing, the manufacturer links there. Alpine as a brand, obviously reasonably exciting from a sort of sports star perspective. But yeah, Ocon's Mercedes links complicate that, and Gasly equally, if you're his management, as we know they're getting around to everybody who's got availability and saying, look, he's still here, he's still race winner, he's still got potential.
Yeah, we'll fire through some more teams as well, because there's quite a lot of unknowns at this stage. The next one we'll look at is Williams. We mentioned Alex Albon signed to the end of 2025, potentially Red Bull material for 2026. But what about his teammate? Let's talk about Logan Sargent and whether or not we'll even see him in Formula One in 2025.
Yeah, I think what happened in Australia and him being benched for Alex Albon having destroyed the other car, it's a pretty clear indication. I mean, everybody knows this. This is not, brand new analysis, but Williams has no confidence in him, and obviously does not see him being part of a long-term future. Now, obviously, it's essentially American owned. If that was to be tied to some, brand new massive blue chips US sponsor coming in and saying we must have an American driver, the fact that he's there and can provide continuity would work massively in his favour. But really, let's face it, at this point the paddock is not expecting Logan Sargent to be continuing at Williams, and honestly he's had a good shake at it now and he hasn't shown, I think, that he's F1 worthy.
It's tough for him, but it's the nature of the beast, isn't it? We've seen bigger names fall, haven't we, within Formula One over the years. Let's move to another team then, an RB. You mentioned Daniel Ricciardo pretty early on, actually, about there was a seat at Red Bull and he seems to be doing everything he can to not be having that seat. But if you look at Daniel Ricciardo and his teammate, Yuki Tsunoda, they've also got Liam Lawson very much waiting in the wings, haven't they, from a very strong showing last season when Daniel Ricciardo was injured.
They certainly do, and there's been rumours flying about that potentially as soon as the Miami rounds, Red Bull were going to say, Ricciardo, if your performance doesn't pick up, we'll replace you with Liam Lawson. Now, that was always said to be wide of the mark, because if you've attracted, Cash App and Visa on the strength of Ricciardo's personality basically alone, why would you get rid of him before at least the first US race? I mean, I think that basically ties him to RB at least until the end of the season. But yeah, we know Helmut Marko massively rates Liam Lawson. And I think ultimately, although Christian Horner, you could see that very clearly in Drive to Survive, wants Daniel Ricciardo back at Red Bull, he's just so far showing that, he's not good enough. Now, he got a chassis change at the Chinese Grand Prix. He did say that was better. He was ahead of Yuki Tsunoda in both qualifying sessions, where the only chance really where RB is able to shine, or any of those bottom five teams, because of how congested it is for the top five teams in the point scoring. Then obviously Ricciardo taken out of the Grand Prix. So, yeah, it's very difficult for him to show what he's going to do. But it feels, considering he's underwhelmed, more likely that Lawson would be returning and you'd keep Tsunoda, who's delivering. Because the other factor in, Ricciardo was showing better in Shanghai. He himself, to be fair, to his credit, stood up and said, look, I'm always pretty handy around here. He's a race winner there. So was it a sort of circuit-specific revival? But Red Bull not without options for who to put at RB if it does want to get rid of Ricciardo. But equally, don't underestimate the value of his brand, of his personality in terms of doing what Red Bull want with its major, and these are major blue chip US sponsors at that team. So it could be that they say, well, Tsunoda, you've had your time, you've been good enough, but there's business reasons for keeping Ricciardo around, and we want Liam Lawson as a change to come in alongside you. It would be harsh considering the last few races, but equally there's been many other occasions where Tsunoda hasn't seemed to hasn't got the temperament, maybe just hasn't got the consistency to cut it at the top level in Formula One. As I said, that could equally cut the other way, and he might earn a shock Red Bull promotion if it was left with potentially a lack of other options. But very interesting, as ever, really, at that team. I think to keep an eye on what happens with the drivers coming up.
Haas is a team that over the years have tried this 2 rookies in the same season. Didn't work particularly well for them. They went back to the old hats, should we call them, in the nicest possible sense, and they're both delivering quite well this season, aren't they? So what about Haas and what they're going to do? I know we've already mentioned a certain driver that could step in, who's a teammate of another driver in Formula 2 at Prema Racing, but what about Haas and their 2 drivers?
Ollie Behrman, did step in for Carlos Sainz, and was already set to be a big part of Haas's 2024 because he was, he's going to be doing those 6 FP1 outings, and that was really seen as a sort of really a full shakedown of whether he's cut out to make it in Formula One, and he showed in Jeddah on that one-off appearance that he can do the job in terms of bringing the points in. That car, it has to be said, did have the pace to be on the podium, but he was dropped in at the last minute. He had no practice. Let's not be too harsh on him. Sorry, he had that FP3 appearance, but anyway, I think it's much more likely to see Ollie Behrman coming in for Haas, or perhaps even just as likely to see him coming in at Haas than when we compare the Antonelli promotion as their Prema teammates in Formula 2. Haas loves him. Haas, in Mexico, basically were just like, this guy's come from Ferrari, from their academy. He's switched on. He's very technically sound. He's very likeable, and obviously very talented. And actually, again, just on the Antonelli front, Behrman racing in Jeddah, really, Mercedes were really chuffed about that, because they were like, well, hang on a minute, we can now see just how good the guy that our guy is racing against is. This is what we might get, and even more if we were to do what we want to do, which is promote Antonelli for 25 or the coming years. So, some change is expected at Haas. Who's it going to be in place of? If Hülkenberg's off to Audi, well, there's your open slot. Kevin Magnussen, he's doing better, I think. He's not still had the sort of consistent Hülkenberg shining moments like in qualifying we saw in 2023. And then you've got those awful moments like hitting Tsunoda, basically taking him out of the race. The rear of the car getting away from Magnussen and into Tsunoda and sending him off in the Chinese Grand Prix. So, that's the sort of question mark. Is the end coming for Magnussen? Likeable character, but again, had multiple chances in Formula One. When Haas potentially have exciting, fresh faces out there, other opportunities for them.
So Behrman could go to Haas. Antonelli, his Prema teammate, could be at Williams, could be at Mercedes in 2025. We just don't know. So many question marks over so many drivers and so many teams. It's sure going to be fun watching it play out over the next few months, that's for sure. Don't forget to check out Alex's lovely bit of work at Autosport.com. Read the article in full and then comment. Let us know who you think is going to move and to where. And if you like this episode, don't forget to subscribe as well, where you can stay across all things Formula One. Until next time, thanks for watching.